Merry Christmas, everybody. And Christmas in the hockey world means World Junior time. So I hope you're all enjoying your holiday season so far. I'm Tyler Yaremchuk. He is our daily Faceoff prospect analyst, Stephen Ellis, and we are here to get set for the 2025 World Junior tournament that gets going tomorrow. Stephen, this is your Super Bowl. No, the draft is your Super Bowl. This is something else, I guess.
Yeah, there's kind of no real comparison, right? Like, This is the tournament that I feel like is probably the reason I love hockey as much as I do. So it's Christmas is kind of just a distraction leading up to this event.
I love it. And you're going to be boots on the ground for us this year at the tournaments. We look forward to all of your coverage. You mentioned it's the tournament that kind of made you love hockey as much as you do. So what was your first World Junior memory?
I think it starts with maybe that 06 tournament, watching Justin Pogge do what Justin Pogge did that year, 6-0-0, and some incredible numbers. Obviously didn't have that much of a career after that in the NHL, but did play professional hockey for a long time. My favorite memory, though, might be watching that 2007 shootout between Canada and the United States. The one Jonathan Toews got the hat trick in. Patrick Kane was part of that. Carey Price was incredible. Like, that was such an exciting moment. And I remember watching that before school and being so hooked. I just wanted those two teams to keep scoring. I wanted to see that go on forever. It was so exciting. Made me probably like the shootout a bit more than most people, but you ask a lot of Canadian fans that grew up around that same time which ones they remember the most, and that tournament in particular will be remembered. But that shootout was incredible.
Yeah, my first ever memory and moment I can think of with the World Juniors was the 04 Matt Hallischuk golden goal. I don't remember anything else from that tournament, but I remember I would have been 7 years old or 8 years old, one of the two, and Matt Hallischuk scored that goal, and I remember watching it on TV at my house. And then I think, like a lot of people, it's kind of funny. I think your peak World Junior years are almost like from when you're like 10, 11 to when you're 18, because you're like off school, so you have nothing else to be worried about, no work, no job, and you are just dialed into the World Juniors for like 12 days. The Eberle goal is obviously unbelievable. I talked to Tyler Ellis, who was on that team the other day, about like how that goes in, they win the shootout, they won that gold medal game. People kind of forget, like, the Eberle moment is so high, or it's right there on the Mount Rushmore of Canadian World Junior moments. People forget that was a semifinal. Like, they had to go play Sweden after, and they stomped them. And Ennis just kind of said, like, there was never a doubt. We had so much confidence after winning that game the way we did. There was just, never a doubt. And they stomped Sweden 5-1 in that gold medal game. But this tournament, you cover all of these U17 prospect tournaments and all of this stuff. If it wasn't the time of year it was, it would not have the fanfare.
Yeah, like, you look at the U18 tournament, and this is like the World Juniors before the World Juniors, and I love that event. It's great. Been to it the last couple of years, and it's kind of a window into what we're going to see at the international level for the next couple of years. But it's usually in Europe, it's usually in the morning, and it's usually overlapping with the Stanley Cup playoffs, so people aren't paying attention. I guess the magic of having it when it is obviously people are home for the holidays, they get that opportunity to watch, but it's kind of like the dead point of the NHL season. What happens December 28th doesn't typically matter when it comes to the NHL standings at the end of the year, but when you get the chance to watch, your future stars come alive in a tournament like this, like, there's a lot to like about it. But yeah, like, I watch so many different international tournaments. The Men's World Championship, for example, just doesn't get the fanfare, especially in North America. And I think part of it is this World Juniors in a perfect time to get that fanfare.
Let me ask you one more before we dig into this year's tournament, and it is, do you prefer and I'm talking from a fan perspective, not a media coverage perspective, from a fan perspective, do you prefer a European tournament with 7, 8, 9, 10 a.m. games, or do you prefer the bright lights of a Canadian or North American tournament?
I love the being in prime time because I want as many people to watch it as possible. I know saying that, 7 o'clock games, 8 o'clock games in North America, Eastern time, of course, not exactly fan friendly in Europe. But when it comes to this tournament, this is the one that North Americans really get involved in. They don't pay attention too much about the World Championship. We saw the last two Olympics. I don't know if anyone was awake watching those games. This is an opportunity to put this in as many eyeballs in North America as humanly possible. And those are the Canada, USA. That's the main viewing audience for this tournament every single year. So throwing it there is great. You get a whole day of hockey where the first game starts at noon. You kind of go all day long. So you can get your whole afternoon settled there. But there is something special about having World Junior hockey in the morning and NHL at night. You get hockey literally, basically 24 hours a day, it feels like.
Yeah, which isn't bad. This year it is in Ottawa, which, funny enough, that is the rink where Jordan Eberle scored that tying goal back in the 2009 tournament, I believe it was. But I like it in North America. I like the prime time, but I will say I love it in the junior towns, or junior cities, I should call them that, not towns. But like when it's Halifax, Saskatoon, like it just has a totally different vibe to it.
Yeah, like first off, I looked at a lot of the pre-tournament tickets, and seeing $50 for a pre-tournament game involving Germany and Sweden feels a little off to me. But yeah, it's cool seeing the markets like Halifax, or we've seen in Saskatchewan, things like that. Like that's cool because you won't get a bigger event there. And that crowd specifically in Halifax, when Connor Bedard was doing Connor Bedard stuff in 2023, we might not see anything like that in a Canadian hosted tournament for a very long time.
Yeah, that was an unbelievable memory, the way Bedard just took over that tournament. Let's talk a little bit about this year. And you have a bunch of preview articles up over at the site. You've been grinding away on this for well over a month now. But how do you, I guess, in general, rate the prospect class in this year's tournament? There maybe isn't a Connor Bedard, Connor McDavid may truly take over this thing, but how do you rate the class in general?
I think it's a pretty average group here. Like Easton Cowan, we know he's going to be a guy a lot of people are paying attention to, the Toronto Maple Leafs prospect. You've got Gabe Perreault, you've got Ryan Leonard. There's just so many guys that we could see playing in the NHL in the next 2 years and playing impact roles. Like Ryan Leonard in particular could very well be playing with Alex Ovechkin in the Washington Capitals next year. And like, that's really cool to see that we get to see this last look of him at the junior level. And I think, you look at some teams like Czechia and Slovakia. Czechia is maybe not as deep or as strong as we've seen in the last couple of years, but Edward Shala is having an outstanding year in the AHL. You look at Dalibor Dvorsky. He's probably one of the best players in this tournament. He's been in this tournament, I think, 4 or 5 times already. So, there is some high quality players. You look at the guys who are not going to be there. Connor Bedard obviously was never going to make it. They're never going to be there. Macklin Celebrini, Will Smith, Zach Benson. Like there were guys that obviously weren't going to be there, but we are for the most part seeing best on best. And that's really good. So I'd say not a super special group. Average maybe is the way to put it, but it's still pretty solid. I'm happy with it.
So we'll go through a couple of the big contenders here. Let's start with Canada. They're coming off a quarterfinal loss at last year's tournament relative, and I guess I'm just kind of asking the same question, but zeroed in on Canada, relative to other Canadian teams. How do you view this group?
I think this group has a lot more scoring depth than people give it credit for. A lot of people heading into the tournament were looking at like, oh, Michael Misa wasn't invited to camp. Zane Parekh wasn't originally invited and was cut. Who's going to score all these goals? Well, so much so that Sam Dickinson was a healthy scratch during the pre-tournament. This guy might get 40 goals as a defenseman this year in the OHL. Like, this is a team that's got so many scoring options to work with. One name I'll mention is Luca Pinelli, a guy who is on pace for over 50 goals this year in the OHL. Small, energetic guy. Still felt like a bit of a long shot to make Team Canada, despite his coach being Dave Cameron, the coach of the World Junior team, of course. But he might get 50 goals this year in the OHL. Like, and that might be your third or your fourth line forward. He might even be the 13th or 14th for one of the extra guys this year. Like, that type of scoring depth is incredible. So, sure, maybe not on paper the strongest group they could have brought, but still an exceptionally strong group that has a lot of guys who play roles. Like, you look at the American team last year. Canada beat them in the pre-tournament. Then the Americans went on a roll and won everything and won gold. But that was not a team that had 4 scoring lines. Like, they had a good 4th line that was very good defensively and checked hard. And that's what we're seeing with this Canadian team, where the guys you're expecting to be those energy guys are still top quality CHL players. So I'm expecting a lot of scoring from this group. And we saw it in the pre-tournament, especially against that game against Switzerland, where those 4 goals right off the bat weren't just flukes. It wasn't bad goaltending. It was Canada outplaying them. So a lot of talent there.
You wrote that the blue line could be maybe one of their weaknesses. Who are some of the players that could maybe change that, though? Like a couple maybe X factors that, like, okay, if they have a big tournament and play their best hockey, maybe this blue line isn't as bad as we think.
It's their weakness, but it's still one of the strongest blue lines in the tournament. That's a good role to be in, I'd say. But when you're looking at it, Matthew Schaefer was fantastic in those U Sports games, fantastic heading into the training camp. And he's one of the top prospects for this year's draft. He might go first overall. And for a defenseman that moves and has the skill that he has, like, you hear Jeff Merrick talk about it all the time. Like, this guy should go number 1. And I'm on board with that right now. I think he's so talented. A lot of similarities to the way that Cale Makar plays. I'm not saying he's Cale Makar, but you look at the way that he skates and moves the puck, and you notice that. I think that Bo Akey will be an interesting one, and a lot of Oilers fans have been talking about him, but this is a guy that I feel like is kind of, I don't know if we've really been able to unlock his full potential. He's having a good year in the OHL with the Barrie Colts, and I feel like he's just kind of one step away from being a star prospect. He's looked really good in the OHL, but he hasn't played a ton of hockey in the last 2 years. This could be an opportunity for him to stand out. Beyond that, Oliver Bonk and Sam Dickinson, the London Knights prospects, two great defensemen. Tanner Molendyk might have been the best in the pre-tournament that we've seen, so that's another good sign there. But, it's a good group that you don't even need Zane Parekh, a guy who's out there getting 70 points a year in the OHL, potentially 80 or 90 this year. You don't need them because you've got these other options.
Goaltending. Every international tournament Canada is in, it feels like goaltending has Canadians just clenching up a little bit. How worried should Canadians be about their goaltending in this tournament?
Not at all. And that's because they have three goalies who could legitimately be starting goalies on most teams in this tournament. You look at Carter George and you see his numbers this year, 4 wins in 23 games of the Owen Sound attack. Doesn't exactly look that impressive. But if you watched him this year, he might be the best goalie in the OHL. And he also has a goal this year too. Like, he's had to help out Owen Sound in a big way by scoring a goal. But this is someone who was really good at the U18s last year. Maybe not the greatest stats in the world, but when it really mattered in that medal round, he was maybe Canada's best player outside of Gavin McKenna. So right now I'm thinking we're looking at Carter George being the starting goalie here for Team Canada. Carson Bjarnason has the best stats of any of the three Canadian goalies. He's been really good in the WHL. And Jack Ivankovic, which, again, if you've paid attention to the Daily Faceoff for the last couple of years, I've been raving about him because he's one of the best young goalies coming up. Someone who I think could be an Olympic goalie for Canada in the next 10 years. Little small, at 5'11", but he's extremely athletic, doesn't make a lot of mistakes on the net, and he's having a great season at Brampton. So those are three goalies that could be starters on most teams. Again, what a good situation to be in, especially compared to last year where it looked like nobody wanted to be the starting goalie.
Yeah, that is a great point. Let's switch gears and go to the Americans, where there is no doubt who their starting goalie is. Trey Augustine between the pipes. I look at this team on paper and I'm like, hey, 3 returning defensemen. I mentioned Augustine in net. They have a guy, Ryan Leonard, up front, who, like you mentioned, he could be playing next year with Alex Ovechkin. Steven, he could be playing at the end of this season. This is a guy who could come out of college and be on a playoff run with the Capitals in a few months. But I look at this team on paper. They look almost flawless. Are they?
Yeah, they're about as close to that as you're going to get. They made some interesting cuts. I thought cutting EJ Emery, the New York Rangers prospect, who might have been the best pure defensive defenseman on this group. Cutting him was a bit odd, especially given how well he's played with Cole Hudson. But it just shows you how deep this group is, where, up front, you've got Trevor Connolly and Cole Eiserman, these guys who could produce from everywhere. You've got Oliver Moore, might be the fastest skater I think I've ever seen outside of maybe Connor McDavid, who's a pretty good player. You've got these really good role players like Brody Zemer and Teddy Stiga. Oh, and then you've also got the Boston College trio of James Haggins, Ryan Leonard, and Gabe Perreault, who are dominating the college scene. You look at the blue line, there's kind of a good mix of everything. You've got the shutdown guys, you've got the Paul Fishers and guys like that. You've got the skilled guys like Zeev Bouillon and Cole Hudson. When you've then got Trey Augustine, the best goalie in this tournament, as your goalie, it's going to be very hard to penetrate this group. And if he doesn't play well, Hampton Selinsky is extremely good and would be a starting goalie for the Americans in most other years. So, yeah, this is a group that the United States have never won gold in consecutive years. But if, looking back at the teams that have fallen short, they've never been as good as what we're about to see going to Ottawa this year.
Let's talk about Team Sweden a little bit, who you have up in that top tier as well. The other day or last week on Daily Faceoff Live, we talked about Axel Sandin Pellikka, who you said he has a chance to be the first ever back-to-back defenseman of the tournament.
Second, actually. I got that stat incorrect, but the first in the kind of the modern era. And there's a reason why. Like last year, watching him as an 18-year-old, he was a star, a guy that didn't look like one of the younger players out there. So for him to go out there and win that was incredible. And he's got a very good chance of doing it here again, where he truly is one of the best defensemen in this tournament, if not the best. The Detroit Red Wings have a very good one there. He's played really good in the SHL. I could see him step into the NHL the minute his contract's over. He's just that good of a player. And then you've got Theo Lindstein, who was just as good, and in some cases maybe even better than him last year. You got Tom Wielander, the Vancouver Canucks prospect, who, if that's your number 3 defenseman, that's a very good situation to be in, because again, he'd be number 1 on most teams in this tournament. And it goes deeper. Axel Hertig, the Calgary Flames prospect, Rasmus Bergqvist, the Montreal Canadiens prospect. Those are 2 guys who are very good in their own zone. The thing this group is lacking, though, is a high-end goal scorer. They don't have a Jonathan Lekaramaki this year, but they've got Felix Unger-Sorum, who's been in the AHL all year. They've got David Edstrom, who's very smart, Victor Eklund, who's a top 5 prospect for this year's draft, and Otto Stenberg, who was outstanding last year and pretty much every time he plays for Sweden. So not as deep as Canada or USA, but still extremely strong.
I'm looking again at the returning players, like even Otto Stenberg, who you wrote about in your team preview. He had some great moments last year. Like, is there a tier? Does it go like Canada, USA, break Sweden, or is Sweden in that group?
Sweden's in that group too, because again, not as skilled as those, but I think that a couple of things they got going for them is a lot of returning players.
Yeah.
This group is made up of guys that made it to the U18 finals 2 years ago, and then also made it to the bronze medal game last year and won bronze. So there's a lot of guys who've brought home hardware from this group and know how to win, and that chemistry there is going to come in key, because unlike the U.S. World Junior team or the Canada World Junior team, this group plays a bunch of smaller tournaments throughout the year. At least the players that are playing in Europe, they'll play in a couple tournaments in the summer. There's one in November, and then obviously leading into this tournament. So that chemistry is going to be very good there, but they just don't have a ton of flaws. So the Swedes never are the most skilled team, the most talented team by any means, but they play a really strong system. They're always good defensively, and they typically get good goaltending. And you combine that here, they're going to look really good.
The Finns are always pesky. What do you think of Team Finland heading into this tournament?
This is not the strongest Finnish team, but it's kind of when you start undervaluing them that they ended up winning the whole tournament. It's been a while, though, since they've won, 2019. So they've had a couple years of just kind of feeling things out. They completely collapsed in that bronze medal game last year, where they're winning 5-3. Pretty much with 10 minutes to go in the game, and then they allowed 5 goals or 4 goals in like the last minute of the game or something crazy like that. With this group, they do have a bunch of good forwards out there. I do like Konsta Helenius, the Buffalo Sabres prospect. He should be very important. Kasper Halttunen, probably one of the best shots in this tournament. He's really good. Emil Hemming, a workhorse out there. Jesse Kiskinen, the Detroit Red Wings prospect, is having an outstanding season. He's been one of the best European base prospects this year. For me, the big question is, who's that goalie going to be when Petteri Rimponen has been the best goalie this year? He's not drafted, and he had some so-so moments at the U18s last year, but he's having a great year in Liga. That's important. What about Kim Saarinen, the Seattle Kraken prospect, the only drafted goalie prospect on this team? Not having as good of a year. Noah Valley, he's the oldest player on this team. He played 2 games last year. Is he going to get starts? I'm not convinced. So for me, no high-end talent on this Finnish group, but enough quality players that they should at the very least be competing for a medal, and anything short of a Final Four finish is going to be a major disappointment.
Obviously no Russia at this tournament, which opens the door for kind of someone else to maybe take a shot and pull off an upset. Slovakia, Switzerland, Czechia, Latvia, Germany, any one of those teams stand out to you?
I'm going with Slovakia, and that's maybe not the most popular pick of all, especially for a team that only has 2 drafted prospects on it. But it's a group that has, again, seen a lot of success at the U18 level. They've made it to the bronze medal game 2 years in a row. That team 2 years ago, in particular, Dalibor Dvorsky and Maxim Sturbak, their 2 drafted prospects, was a very strong group. And the goalie that year was Samuel Urban, who I expect to be the starting goalie this year. They've got one player that a lot of scouts are going to be looking at, Luka Radivojevic, who was the best Slovakian defenseman last year. He was only, I think, 16 years old. So pretty incredible that what he was able to do. His dad, Branko, used to play in the NHL. That's kind of a puck doku player right there. But, there's a lot of that built-in chemistry, which helps. Now, the built-in chemistry is not as big of a deal as it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, where teams like Canada and USA only ever really played 1 or 2 pre-tournament games. For Canada, they're together for 2.5 weeks before they play their first meaningful game. So they're able to build chemistry. But for Slovakia, they're a hardworking, skilled, fast team that doesn't have a ton of high-end goal scorers, but they're going to make you work very hard. And seeing what we saw last year with that team, where they made a couple surprises along the way before eventually getting crushed by the Americans, I do think Slovakia is going to go out there and be a dark horse medal contender.
Last one, I intentionally left out Kazakhstan because I'll be honest, as I was getting ready for this, I was almost like rubbing my eyes. My coffee hasn't kicked in yet. I'm like, Kazakhstan's in this tournament? How many goals are they going to score? I won't ask you how many wins. How many goals are they going to score?
I'm going with 3 before the relegation round. I will say they do have a good goalie in Vladimir Nikitin, the Ottawa Senators prospect, and they did battle really hard at the U18s with a lot of those guys. It's not a good group, though, and we saw them lose 4-0 to Germany in their first pre-tournament game, and it wasn't remotely close from what I was told in that game. So they're the ones I'm expecting to be going down next year in place of Denmark, who will be coming up for the 2026 tournament.
All right. Should be an interesting one. As always, we look forward to your coverage. Our World Juniors preview is brought to you by Fountain Tire. You and your family's safety is important. That's why Fountain Tire treats your vehicle like it's their vehicle. Maybe it's new tires. Maybe your engine has a little rattle. You can trust the service at Fountain Tire. They actually take pictures of your vehicle, let you know which parts are A-OK, what needs attention now, and even what can wait a little bit. It's all about trusted, reliable service at Fountain Tire. Stop in today, make an appointment, or check them out online at fountaintire.com. Steven, you enjoy this tournament, and we will chat with you again in the new year.
Thanks so much.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.